For centuries, there was this one disease, a shadow that hung over all of humanity, and its name alone, smallpox, was enough to inspire absolute terror.
I mean, this thing was a global predator, a relentless killer that stalked every single continent, every society, and it left this awful trail of death and disfigurement wherever it went.
And then, in this amazing moment of global cooperation, we did the impossible. We hunted this ancient monster down, and we wiped it clean off the face of the planet. A total victory, right? Well, or so we thought. Turns out, the story we all thought we knew, it's got a few more chapters. And these new twists are not just changing how we see the past, they're actually casting this long shadow over our future, too. Okay, so let's get into it. First things first, we need to remember who the enemy was. Because, living in a world without smallpox, it's really easy to forget just how terrifying this disease actually was. So, this is it. This is variola. Under a microscope, it kind of looks like a tiny, harmless brick, doesn't it? But don't let that fool you. This little particle was one of the most efficient, most ruthless killers in all of human history. The scale of the devastation is honestly hard to wrap your head around. Just look at 18th century Europe. This virus killed 400,000 people. And I don't mean in total. I mean every single year. Just let that sink in for a second. And we're not talking about a mild illness you just get over. No way. The most common form, variola major, had a staggering mortality rate. It killed up to 1 in 3 people it infected. And if you were one of the lucky ones who survived, the ordeal was far from over. So many people were left with permanent scars or even blinded by it. The personal cost was just immense. It was a grief that echoed through families for generations. Think about Benjamin Franklin, one of the smartest people of his time. He was absolutely haunted by the death of his 4-year-old son, a loss that he carried with him for the rest of his life. But here's the thing. Humanity didn't just sit back and suffer. We fought back. Faced with this relentless killer, our ancestors came up with an idea that was, well, it was radical, and it was incredibly risky. It was called variolation. Now, the idea itself was pretty simple, but the practice, absolutely terrifying. Doctors would take material from a mild smallpox case and deliberately infect a healthy person. The hope was that you'd get a mild version of the disease and then be immune for life. It was a crazy gamble, right? You were literally giving yourself the disease you were trying to avoid. And this is why people took that crazy gamble. Look, variolation was dangerous, for sure. About 2% of people died from it. But catching smallpox the normal way, as Benjamin Franklin called it the common way, that was more than 10 times deadlier. So it was a choice between a terrible risk and a catastrophic certainty. So this desperate idea, this early innovation born out of pure fear and a little bit of hope, it was the very first step, a crucial step on a long, hard road that would eventually lead to one of the greatest achievements in all of human history, the complete and total eradication of smallpox.
But get this, even as late as the 1950s, after we'd had vaccines for centuries, smallpox was still just a fact of life for a huge part of the world. Take a look at this map from 1955. The virus was endemic, which just means it was always there, across huge parts of Africa, Asia, and South America.
So, by the mid-60s, the world basically said, enough is enough. The World Health Organization launched this massive, coordinated final push. And the goal wasn't just to control the disease anymore. The goal was to exterminate it. It was like an army of public health workers fanning out across the globe, this global detective force, hunting down every single last case. And you know what? They did it. In 1980, the world was officially declared free of smallpox. This monster that had plagued humanity for centuries was gone, wiped out, a total victory. The end of the story. Or so it seemed. But what if the monster we defeated wasn't quite the ancient enemy we thought it was? What if the real story of smallpox is much more recent and way more complex than any of us ever imagined? Because some recent discoveries have added a totally astonishing new chapter to this story. Okay, so for years, the thinking went like this. We had these historical accounts that seemed to describe smallpox-like diseases going back thousands of years, right? Places like ancient Egypt and China. So everyone just assumed the virus had been with us since the dawn of civilization, this constant grim companion. And then, a discovery came from a place no one expected.
Scientists were studying the mummified remains of a child found in a church crypt in Lithuania, and they managed to do something incredible. They extracted and sequenced the entire genome of the variola virus that had infected this child way back around the year 1650. This mummy was about to tell us a huge secret.
And this is where things get really interesting. The DNA from that mummy, it turned out to be the ancestor of all the 20th century smallpox strains we know about. Scientists used this really cool technique, it's kind of like a genetic calendar, to trace it back. And what they found just blew the old theory out of the water. The common ancestor of the virus we eradicated didn't emerge thousands of years ago. It appeared sometime between 1580 and 1650. That means the global killer we know and fear might have been a relatively modern problem.
So why does this matter now? Well, this whole rewriting of smallpox history has a direct and frankly a startling connection to our world today. Because while variola might be gone, its family isn't. The fight against the bigger poxvirus family is still very much happening.
And we saw this play out so clearly during the 2022 mpox outbreak. A study in France was looking at how severe the symptoms were, and they found this really striking pattern. For patients who had gotten the old childhood smallpox vaccine decades ago, only 2% had really bad symptoms. But for those who were never vaccinated, that number jumped to 8%, 4 times higher. It's like the old shield we built against smallpox still gives us some protection against its cousins.
And that brings us to the final and kind of unsettling chapter of the story. You see, our victory over smallpox wasn't as absolute as we like to think. There's still a ghost of the virus lingering, not out in the wild, but in a place that's arguably much more dangerous.
The variola virus is not extinct. Officially, it still exists in 2 high-security freezers, one in the United States and one in Russia. And for decades, scientists have been locked in this fierce debate. What do we do? Do we destroy these last samples and make the virus truly extinct for good, or do we have to keep them for research, just in case it ever somehow comes back?
And believe me, this isn't just some academic argument. As Tom Ridge, the very first Secretary of Homeland Security, pointed out, the threat of bioterrorism is very real and it's not going away. And think about it, in a world where most of us have zero immunity to smallpox, an intentional release of this virus from one of those labs, well, it's a catastrophic nightmare scenario.
So that leaves us with this really profound and unsettling question. We celebrated this incredible, historic victory. We got rid of a disease that had terrorized us for centuries. But the story of smallpox is both a story of success and a powerful warning. We defeated the monster, yeah, but we kept a piece of it locked away in a freezer. And now you have to wonder, is the book on humanity's deadliest foe really closed for good? Or is the final, most terrifying chapter still waiting to be written?